Tonight on Dreadful Visions, we're stepping into one of the smallest places you can get trapped. Most elevator rides last less than a minute, but sometimes the person standing beside you was never supposed to be there in the first place. Story 1. The man in the elevator never pressed a button. Daniel Brooks had worked as an accountant in downtown Atlanta for nearly 6 years. Tax season always meant late nights, and by the end of March, staying in the office until midnight had become normal. The building where he worked stood 32 stories tall, housing dozens of businesses during the day. At night, though, it became eerily quiet. Once the cleaning crews finished and the last employees went home, the only people left were a couple of overnight security guards in the lobby. One Thursday evening, Daniel stayed behind to finish a financial report that absolutely had to be submitted before morning. By the time he finally shut down his computer, the office lights had automatically dimmed. His phone read 11:58 p.m. He grabbed his laptop bag, locked the office behind him, and walked toward the elevators at the end of the hallway. The entire floor was silent. No conversations, no printers, no ringing phones, only the faint hum of the building's air conditioning. He pressed the down button. A few seconds later, the elevator door slid open. Someone was already inside. A middle-aged man wearing a neatly pressed gray business suit stood in the back corner of the elevator. He looked completely ordinary. Short gray hair, black dress shoes, a plain blue tie. His hands rested calmly by his sides. He didn't acknowledge Daniel. Daniel stepped inside anyway. The doors closed. Without thinking much about it, Daniel assumed the man must already have selected a floor before he arrived. The elevator began descending. After a few seconds, it stopped. Floor 27. The doors opened. Nobody was waiting. The hallway outside was completely empty. After several seconds, the doors closed again. Daniel glanced toward the control panel. None of the floor buttons were lit. He frowned. Maybe someone on the 27th floor had called the elevator before changing their mind. The elevator continued downward. Floor 19. The doors opened again. Another empty hallway. Nobody entered. Nobody left. Daniel looked back toward the man. He hadn't moved. He wasn't looking at his phone. He wasn't watching the floor numbers. He simply stared straight ahead with the same blank expression. The doors closed once more. The elevator continued descending. Daniel finally looked at the control panel properly. Every floor button was dark. The emergency button hadn't been pressed. Even the lobby button wasn't illuminated. Yet somehow, the elevator was still moving. Daniel cleared his throat. Long night. The man didn't answer. Daniel gave an awkward smile. Working late too? Still nothing. Not even a glance in his direction. The silence inside the elevator suddenly felt much heavier than before. The doors opened again. Floor 11. Empty. Floor 6. Empty. Each stop lasted exactly the same amount of time before the doors quietly closed again. Daniel's heartbeat began to pick up. He leaned forward and pressed the lobby button himself. The button lit up immediately. For the first time since entering the elevator, the man slowly turned his head. He looked directly at Daniel. His expression wasn't angry. It wasn't sad. It was almost confused. Then, in a calm voice that sounded as though he hadn't spoken in years, he quietly asked, "Is this still the accounting department?" Daniel stared at the man. For a moment, he thought he'd misheard him. "Is this still the accounting department?" The question sounded completely normal, like someone who had stepped away from his desk for a coffee break and gotten lost on the way back. Daniel forced a nervous smile. "No. Accounting moved to the 32nd floor a few years ago." The man blinked once, very slowly. Then he looked back toward the elevator doors as if he were trying to remember something. The elevator continued downward. Floor 3. The doors opened onto another empty hallway. Nobody was there. The man didn't move. The doors closed again. Daniel's phone vibrated in his pocket. He glanced at the screen. No signal. That had never happened before. The building always had reception. Just then, the elevator reached the lobby. The doors opened. Daniel stepped out immediately. When he turned around to politely nod goodbye, the elevator was empty. The man was gone. Daniel froze. There hadn't been enough time for anyone to walk past him. The only way out was through the doors directly in front of him. He would have seen the man leave. The overnight security guard looked up from his desk. "Everything all right?" Daniel hesitated before answering. "There was another guy in the elevator with me. Gray suit, maybe in his 50s. "Where'd he go?" The guard frowned. "Another guy?" Daniel nodded. "He was standing right beside me." The guard slowly turned one of the security monitors toward him. "Let's have a look." He rewound the elevator camera. Daniel watched himself enter the elevator. The doors closed. He stood alone. There was nobody else inside. The guard replayed it, then replayed it again. Only Daniel appeared on the footage. No man, no gray suit, nothing. The guard didn't say anything for several seconds. Finally, he leaned back in his chair. "You said," he asked, "if this was still the accounting department?" Daniel felt a chill run through him. "Yeah. Why?" The guard opened a drawer and removed an old newspaper clipping that had clearly been folded hundreds of times. 21 years earlier, a senior accountant named Richard Lawson had suffered a fatal heart attack while working late. According to the article, he had collapsed inside elevator 3 while trying to return to the accounting department after grabbing coffee from the lobby. The accompanying photograph showed a smiling man wearing a gray business suit, a plain blue tie, short gray hair. It was the same man. The next morning, Daniel convinced himself the whole experience had been caused by exhaustion. He went back to work as usual. Around 9:30 a.m., an email arrived from building management. Subject: scheduled elevator maintenance. The email included a photograph taken by the maintenance team just after midnight the previous night. The picture showed the inside of elevator 3. Daniel stood alone near the control panel. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Then he noticed the mirrored wall behind him. Reflected over his shoulder stood the man in the gray suit, looking directly into the camera. Daniel zoomed in. The reflection became clearer. One detail immediately caught his attention. The man's employee ID badge was still clipped to his jacket. The photo was just sharp enough to read the name: Richard Lawson. Daniel deleted the email and never spoke about it again. A month later, he accepted a job with another company across the city. He still works late from time to time, but no matter which building he's in, if an elevator door opens and someone is already standing inside, he always checks one thing before stepping in: whether they've pressed a floor button. Because sometimes, the people still trying to get home don't realize they already left work years ago. If this story made you think twice about your next late-night elevator ride, let me know what you think really happened, and don't forget to like and subscribe to Dreadful Visions for more unsettling stories inspired by everyday places. Sleep well tonight, if you can.